And now, Scandal on Ice and the Brutality of Public Opinion. The story of how the media missed the point. Again. Does not reflect views and opinions of things and stuff. This is for school. Titled by Professor David Lauren. I'm not taking credit for that. If this presentation begins to smoke, get away immediately. Seek shelter and cover head. This presentation may stick to certain types of skin. When not in use, this presentation will be returned to its special container and kept under refrigeration. Failure to do so relieves the makers of this presentation of any and all legal liability.
On January 6, 1994, figure skater Nancy Kerrigan was struck in the knee by Shane Stant at Cobo Arena in Detroit, Michigan. Stant was hired to incapacitate Kerrigan to increase Tonya Harding's chances of going to the 1994 Olympics.
The 5 defendants were convicted of racketeering, conspiracy to commit Class B felony, and hindering prosecution after the fact.
The 5 defendants were Jeff Gillooly, Tonya Harding, Sean Eckhart, Derek Smith, and Shane Stant. Jeff Gillooly, ex-husband of Tonya Harding, was convicted of racketeering. Tonya Harding was convicted of hindering the prosecution after the fact. Sean Eckhart, childhood friend of Gillooly, was convicted of racketeering. Derek Smith and his nephew Shane Stant were convicted of conspiracy to commit a Class B felony. While doing research for this project, I noticed many of the people who I talked to about the investigation were unaware it was a racketeering case. So the primary focus of this presentation is on the investigation as it pertains to the RICO Act. With that in mind, I feel if it hadn't been for RICO, there could have been an international incident, and had Gillooly evaded prosecution, the 5 defendants may have made a career out of the activity. The federal investigation of events leading to the assault discovered that Gillooly had hired Eckhart to have someone incapacitate Kerrigan so Harding could win the Nationals and proceed to the 1994 Olympics. Testimony and evidence revealed numerous voicemails, witnesses, and a paper trail left by the 5 conspirators. Investigators would conclude that 2 payments from Gillooly were provided to Eckhart to pay for the hit. Because of the nature of the case and immediate newsworthiness, a federal investigation began within days of the incident. A few days after the assault, Harding won the Nationals, and by the time she returned to her home in Portland, Oregon, the FBI had already had Harding under surveillance. A week after the incident, the FBI had already arrested Eckhart and Smith. Stant would turn himself in. By the beginning of February, Gillooly would be the first to be convicted in the scandal. Because of the relief Harding sought and the FBI investigation still underway, Harding was able to stop the USFSA and the USOC from disciplinary action until after she returned from the Olympics. After returning, Harding was convicted of hindering the prosecution after the fact. This was due to the FBI investigators witnessing Harding, Gillooly, and Eckhart planning a cover story after returning from the Nationals. A few months later, Eckhart, Smith, and Stant were convicted for their part in the crime.
Some days I feel like people expect me to walk on water. So I do. Except it's not exactly water, and I'm not exactly walking.
Silver medalist figure skater Nancy Kerrigan works out in the Reebok Satellite, a lightweight cross-training shoe. Reebok Satellite is for running, training, and other uplifting experiences.
Tonight on Eye to Eye, Tonya Harding is in Lilyhammer with Connie Chung, a CBS exclusive on the attack of Nancy Kerrigan and Harding's ex-husband's involvement.
Campbell's soup. A meal in itself. Now with real monkey chunks. And now back to your program.
Welcome back, everyone. The results are in. After all the drama built up over the last couple of months, America is feeling quite disappointed.
That's right, Pepper. Chen Lu of China won the bronze. Nancy Kerrigan of the United States won the silver, and Oksana Bayul of Ukraine won the gold.
What a letdown, Cotton. Harding didn't even get a medal.
Well, it just goes to show you can't grab life by the ball if you're still busy fishing.
Yes, get over it!
And now for something completely different.
Welcome back. In addition to general criminal incompetence, The speed in which the five were investigated and convicted should be attributed to the Organized Crime and Control Act. Title IX of the Act was signed into law by President Nixon in 1970 and is known as the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or the RICO Act. Originally targeted mafia and organized crime, it is designed to make it more plausible for prosecutors to indict mob bosses and cripple an organization in the process. RICO allows a U.S. attorney to temporarily seize assets, which in part incentivizes defendants to enter a plea agreement due to the cost of attorney fees. Famous cases include our dear friend Rudy Giuliani, who indicted 11 racketeering suspects, including heads of the five families in 1985 and 1986. Famous films and TV series like Godfather, Sopranos, Sons of Anarchy also portray the activities that are prohibited under RICO.
And now it's time for Wonk With Me, where Katie does a deep dive into the RICO Act and how it applies to the investigation into the Kerrigan assault. Will she come out of it? Will you? The world may never know.
Any good wonk knows to start with definitions when deciphering language and law. Important terms in understanding RICO as it relates to the Harding case are as follows. Racketeering. Racketeering is a pattern of illegal activity, such as bribery, extortion, fraud, and murder, carried out as part of an enterprise, such as a crime syndicate, that is owned or controlled by those engaged in illegal activity. An enterprise is defined as including an individual, partnership, corporation, association, or other legal entity, and any union or group of individuals associated, in fact, although not a legal entity. Interstate commerce means commerce or travel between states and territories and possessions of the United States. Foreign commerce means commerce or travel between any part of the United States and any place outside the United States. In understanding the following, I would like you to keep in mind the intent of the RICO Act was to make it easier for lower-level criminals to get lesser sentences in exchange for information leading to the indictments of mob bosses. This, combined with the financial, interstate, and foreign aspect, required the Act to start with broad interpretations so it can cover more areas, hence its significant expansion. Under the RICO Act, it is prohibited to receive assets and or property obtained through racketeering activity, collect debt obtained through racketeering activity which affect interstate or foreign commerce, be associated or employed by enterprise engaging in racketeering activity, and conspire to commit the aforementioned.
After this message from our sponsors, Katie will put the Harding case to the RICO test. Monday, will Tanya make it to the finale, or will she be forced to take a knee?
Next week, we talk to I, Tanya star Allison Janney about her Oscar win for her portrayal of Tanya Harding's mother, coincidentally, who is also not appearing in this film. Welcome back. Now we are going to look at RICO juxtaposed to the Harding case. This is an analysis and opinion. Number 1, to receive assets and property that is obtained through racketeering activity. Gillooly and Eckhart win this one because they took money and invested it in the hit of Kerrigan. Because they were split into 2 payments, the FBI was able to meet the criteria for 2 activities. I believe the speed in which the FBI reacted in conjunction with the financial aspect made it so that Stant and Smith received a close call on number 2. To collect debt obtained through racketeering activity which affects the interstate or foreign commerce. While Stanton and Smith did travel all over the country in their mission, there is no mention of whether or not they received the money. I would venture to assume they didn't, Otherwise, Stant, who hit Kerrigan, would have met the criteria for 2 activities and been convicted of racketeering. All 5 defendants were associated with Gillooly. Despite the general effectiveness of RICO, the practice of delegating to other people still provided a barrier between indictment and the mob boss. For example, Harding never met Smith and Stant. She knew Eckhart and drove Gillooly to a meeting, but kept her distance. She claimed it was because she was scared. While this is likely true to a point, I believe Gillooly was protective of Harding because she was in essence his primary asset, and therefore he prevented her from direct contact. Last but not least, don't plan to do any of the aforementioned, because that is a crime. Stant and Smith are the winners of this one. They were the snitches that resulted from RICO and were able to provide enough information to convict Gillooly and Eckhart.
What about Tanya?
Okay. For Tanya, the feds were not able to find anything solid except for the cover-up meeting she had with Eckhart and Gillooly. Had Gillooly and Harding not taken steps to keep her distant from the activity, I think she could have been at greater risk for a racketeering conviction. Finally, thanks to RICO, the FBI had defendants in custody before the Olympics, which stopped any escalation and averted potential for an international incident. Gillooly, the mob boss behind the operation, was convicted and sentenced to 2 years in prison. A crime syndicate was stopped from further development. Thanks for watching.
Up next, that chick and this guy who had a show together but are now on separate shows go on to each other's show. But this time, it's different. It's at home.
Does she know she's on mute?
I can't figure out how to share my screen.
You're too close to the camera.
My connection is not... it's perfectly